I have been researching this issue for many years. I've conducted several oral history interviews, so it's a subject that I have been investigating for a while. It's a totally or almost totally undocumented subject. It's been for many years. It's only recently that there is an interest for the subject. So archive research was crucial, and it was equally very difficult. So we were, Fabrizio Laurenti, the co-director, and I were lucky to find the interest of the Luce archives. Clearly, this has made a huge difference because the Luce archives is one of the biggest archives in the country and probably in Europe. So we could draw from a wealth of materials coming from the Luce archives. Everybody knows the Luce archives were funded during the fascist regime. And so they have a huge collection that covers the fascist years. So through the Luce archives, we could document the kind of official images of the regime clearly. And also the homoerotic part of a certain rhetoric to do with male bodies, essentially, and virility and all the rhetoric, the regime rhetoric around it. The film draws from a wealth of other archives, private collections. We dedicated a lot of time to that. Some home movies were found which have not been seen before, and clearly all this is what makes the film it is what creates the contrast between the official images of the regime and the private lives of these people, which is what we wanted to concentrate on and we wanted to document. So there is a wealth of images coming from archives, the private archives in Rome, both filmed and photographed. And there are also a lot of photographs that come from a fantastic shop in what used to be the Jewish ghetto in Rome. There is a shop that is called the Museo del Louvre. And in this very tiny photographic shop with a very grand name, we found some very interesting materials. It is extremely significant that the Luce archives, who were funded by Mussolini in the 30s, are now producing and distributing films that document the fascist repression, not only of homosexuality, but of sexuality in general and on other issues. So this clearly is culturally and politically very significant indeed. Probably that's what we refer to. So the audio material you're referring to probably is of two types. One is the recording of written materials that we found, such as diaries, letters, and we really wanted to document the private lives of homosexuals and lesbians during the fascist regime. So that was very important. It's a very important part of our film. And in this case, we have very poetic words read very well by several actors. Then there is a part of audio material that comes from interviews that I shot some time ago, because as I said, I gathered the oral history interviews as I went along, and so there are snippets of interviews with people who are now either very old or they've left us. So in this case, we kept the original sound clearly, the original voice. Working with sound is always very challenging and fantastically creative. I have a background in radio. I've worked in radio, and I worked as a sound reporter on several projects when I was much younger. And so I am very aware of the potential that audio can have. and of the importance of audio. We were very lucky to find this exchange of letters. So I said that the words are poetic, but they're also quite humorous, in fact. We were very lucky to find an exchange of letters between a group of gay men located in and around Bologna during the 30s. And that's it's a very funny exchange with a lot of slang words and nicknames that are meant to be funny. And so that's also part of our story. It's not just nostalgia, melancholia, love, and whispers, but it's also laughter. I wouldn't say there was so much spontaneous choices, in the sense that we arrived in the editing suite with a fairly good idea of the structure. Having said this, there was a lot of discussion and negotiation between myself and Fabrizio Laurenti, who co-authored and co-directed the documentary. And certainly certain choices were dictated by the material we had. We also shot some interviews with experts and historians for this, and therefore some choices were dictated by their words too. I would say that also the choice of archive was vast. We had a vast selection of material that we had to cut it down quite dramatically. So also on that there was a lot of there were a lot of choices to be made. The element of surprise, well, we hope there is an element of surprise for those who view the film, because I think that the attention has been focused on the repression of homosexuality and the legal methods to repress homosexuality in Italy during the fascist regime. And certainly this is a very important part of the story, is significant, and we included it in the film. But we hope that the viewers will be surprised also by how people showed resilience and how they resisted by living their own lives, by having a full emotional life, despite the repression that was in place, despite the limits, despite the self-censorship, despite the fear. And all this, we hope that creates a picture that is colorful, full of nuances, and gives a full idea of what life was like under the dictatorship. And this could be a surprise, we hope, because, as I said, usually one thinks only about the repression side, and one doesn't think about the resistance side, the dissent, the quiet dissent, the daily life that carries on despite repression that also requires courage. And maybe it's not the resistance with the capital R, it's resistance with the small r. It's equally important.